Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Psych Tech at Work. I am your host, Dr. Charles Handler, and I am moving and grooving today. And I hope you all are too, because we have a great show put together for you. And I want to let everybody know that if you really want to see me get moving a little bit, to kick things off, get everybody's blood flowing, you got to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out the video version of this show with myself and my guest for the day, George Laroque. George is a longtime friend, somebody I've trusted with information of the highest quality. He's the founder of WorkTech, which is an advisory and community that works with and tracks the investment and financial commercial aspects of the HR tech marketplace. And George is really well qualified to do this because he's been a practitioner. He's been there. He's been in the trenches, working with this technology, helping found companies that supply the technology, selling those companies, and he crushes it with his research report and his advisory services. So I'm really excited to have him on today, and I think George really understands the multiple and the complexity really of what's going on with the investment side of things, because technology and psychology are all critical ingredients to that, and hence this show, right? So glad to have him. Today we're going to talk about, not only the investment side of things, past, present, and future. This is essential context for, anybody who's looking to understand HR technology. I'm big about context, right? There's an environment we're working within, a bubble, a circle, if you will, and that ultimately has a huge impact on what happens. But we'll also talk about specific technologies and how they are shaping and influencing people's attitudes and productivity and all this good stuff in the workplace. And of course, investment and companies are all aiming to support that, to support those goals, right? To make work better, to make work a friendlier place. At least we hope so. And that's what seems to be the directionality. So we'll talk about things like the psychology and technology of remote work, user interfaces, user experience, and ease of use of HR technology systems, as well as, of course, generative AI and AI in general. And I would expect you guys to possibly just click away from this show if we didn't talk about those things, because that's what everybody's talking about today. So without further ado, I am so pleased to welcome all-star guest George Laroque.
I'm good, Charles. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries at all. We've talked a lot of times over the years, but it's going to be really great today to get your perspective on all there's not much happening these days in our field. It's kind of boring. So we'll make some small talk. We'll figure out something to talk about, right?
We'll figure it out.
Haha. Not. I want to ask you though first. So does it ever happen that people ask you or get you confused somehow with the hockey player George Laroque, even though your name's not spelled the same? Like, has that happened to you a lot?
It used to happen a lot when I lived in the Boston area, and that was a while ago. That was, I think, when either his career was more recent or happening. And I guess I'm not a huge hockey guy, but he was an enforcer, is what they call him, right?
The enforcer. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. Yeah, you don't look much like him. I'll just
Yeah.
say that, but
I can't skate. I mean, I
yeah,
can, but not
right.
not like he can, I'm sure.
Yeah. I love to play hockey, but I played when I was a kid, and then that was it. And we don't have any ice rinks in New Orleans. I wanted to get my kid, into playing hockey. Not a single ice rink. I guess it's not a surprise, but I figured we might have one somewhere. But
Yeah, we
nope.
we uh we moved up to New Hampshire when I was a boy. I was probably 10 years old, and everybody was like into hockey and skating and like really good. So I never really, it was always one of those things I just couldn't really do. I did learn to skate and everything, but hockey just never became my thing because everybody was so far advanced
Yeah,
that it was just I focused on other things.
yeah. Well, there's lots to focus on. I had the opposite. My mom's from Michigan. She skated a lot, so she had me in figure skating lessons when I was probably could barely stand up. So it
Oh
was a
wow,
pretty
yeah.
natural thing for me to go into. But then it's in Tennessee, you can't go too far with it, really. So anyway, it was lots of fun. So you've had a lot going on in your career, and looking over, done a lot of stuff, more than I even knew. So I'd love for you, as to kind of frame up what we're doing and help everybody understand where you're coming from. Tell us a little bit about your career journey. How'd you get to where you're sitting right now? And
I've been really fortunate in the sense that I got into staffing, and that was and I worked for someone who really invested a lot of time in training and in really development from in recruitment as a profession and a career,
right.
which might not sound all that unusual, but I didn't enter the staffing world in sort of a salesy body shop kind of
Right.
environment, which really helped me. I spent about 10 years, 10 or 11 years on the staffing side of the world, progressed to where I had broken out on my own with a couple of partners, and we had created what would now be called a small RPO, recruitment process outsourcing firm. We
Hmm.
had about 55 people, and this was in the 90s, mid 90s, when the web was just coming, blossoming.
Right.
So we were taking employers onto the web. We were in the Boston area, so they were just called internet startups back then,
Right. Right.
e-commerce type shops and
Hmm.
data communications, and we would take over their hiring internally. And so another fortunate thing to be in, recruitment and what ended up being employer branding at a time when we're moving to this new world of the web. From there, I moved to the tech side. Based on all of that experience, we had been partnering with a small shop that had a database and did a lot of resume scanning. They had been acquired, and they asked me to come on board and help them go to market. And that is the company that became Brass Ring. It was called Hire Systems at the time. So I was like employee
Gotcha.
number 10 or so there.
Uh-huh.
That was my move to the tech side. So this is now, from the late 90s into the early 2000s. Now we're going from just, sort of static experiences on the web to SaaS.
Yeah.
So moving, big global companies, their HR systems, recruitment systems onto the web. Spent about a dozen, 12, 13 years in that world, go to market, strategy, general management. That's where, over those years, spent a lot of time in the whole talent management space, got to go pretty deep from a business perspective in the assessment space. We were trying to bring quality of hire into recruitment. And so I had a lot of experience there. And then from there, moved into what has now, over the last 13 years, this business has evolved, starting as a consultant, working with vendors with their go to market and their strategy. I was at a point where I needed some flexibility for some,
Mhm.
family things that were going on. So started working in that way with vendors. And then I never went back. I always thought I would go back, and I never did, because it just, one customer led to another. I started doing research and putting insights and writing about all of the trends I was seeing, um, and it evolved into this analyst and advisor space. So that's like the quick
Mhm.
thumbnail sketch.
Yeah, that's a lot, and that kind of led me to what I want to hopefully thematically focus on today, which is kind of the nexus between the investment and the tech side, and the excitement there, and what's going on the ground, how people are actually using these tools. You got a good perspective on both, and you've been somebody who's always been a good source, and even, I wouldn't say benchmark necessarily, but in my own analyst work and kind of tracking spaces. And we've talked a little bit about access to our brains through our databases and things like that.
Hmm.
Pretty interesting stuff. And I know you're doing a lot. So one of the things I really excites me is to learn from you directly, what you're seeing kind of in the investment side of things. But let's build up to that,
Okay.
a little bit. But I do want to, as we're kind of moving forward here, tell me and our listeners something. What have you read or consumed recently that really resonated with you that kind of helped form your worldview or contribute to or change your worldview? What's had an impact on you lately?
That's such a good question, and I feel like since since the I sort of put a time stamp around where the pandemic hit,
Yeah,
and from that point forward, it's like what hasn't impacted my
I
worldview.
know, right?
Uh, so and it's not just about the pandemic, but that was where, the world was already different. We were, things in the US here very polarized,
Hmm.
seeing a lot of things for the first time, a lot of, societal unrest, a lot of issues,
Yeah,
and then the pandemic hit and things just went completely upside down. And and it goes from there. I mean, looking at what's happening with social media, and I've read a lot about the impact neurologically with social media and the impact on, because I have three kids that were at home through the
yeah.
pandemic. Seeing how each of them adapted differently, from
Hmm.
almost thriving in remote learning to hating it, and
Yeah.
everything, sort of the whole spectrum there. But at the same time, watching social media creep in, and gosh, I feel like there's so much that like, there's been so much coming at all of us, but coming at me for a while now, that it's just been from so many levels, realizing what's right in the world, what's wrong in the world, what's hurting us. Gosh, I don't know if that's a good answer for you, Charles, but
I mean, look, it is your answer. It is yours. And I think it resonates with me. So I think when you say that, everybody's got a story. Everybody can put themselves in that moment in time when you refer, to the pandemic. It's such a big divider. I'm here in New Orleans, and we had Hurricane Katrina back in 2005, and that's another life divider for me, right? So
yeah,
everybody
yeah,
here kind of defines and then the pandemic is another one that obviously impacted all of us. My kid he's now 10, but he was just in kindergarten during the pandemic. So, and he's in French immersion. So, trying to sit there and keep him on task when I couldn't really understand. I know a little French, but it was just, I found myself wanting to be a 6-year old and goof off with him more than because I didn't want to pay attention. So it was an interesting experience for sure. And just no matter what, the constant bombardment of information and stimuli now, it's overwhelming, right? And so I feel like we're learning a lot of new stuff and we're exposed to a lot, but I don't know what the capacity is to actually absorb it.
yeah. I hear you.
Yeah. So you feel, if we think about just people that are working in basically, I would say the people department, HR, what have you, whatever slice there is. There's a lot of them, but have you feel like you got a good pulse really on what's going on, in the trenches there in the world of folks. I mean, I have my own opinions as well, but what are your thoughts? What's going on right now?
Well, I think I do. I think I have a good pulse. I work hard to keep an eye on that.
Yeah,
I think the first thing I would say is that, like everything in the world right now, not everybody is experiencing things the same way. So when you talk about the people department,
right, right.
what size company, but then what industry, what particular role, and that when I get on a call or a Zoom with someone, regardless of their role, each call I want, it's like everybody's hair's on fire right now,
Yeah.
but I like, why
Uh-huh.
is different on,
Why?
some it's they're freaking out because things are tough, and they're having to go, consider layoffs, and they're being pushed to cut costs. Others, their hair's on fire because it's like things are crazy and they can't keep up.
Yeah,
Where those lines start to get drawn in the world of recruitment, for example. Right now, if you're in a frontline high volume world, you may be pushed to cut some costs, but you're hiring just as much, and the challenges are
yeah.
just amplified.
Hmm.
If you're in big tech, it's a scary time right now. If you're
Yeah,
in tech in the financial world, you're uneasy, but you're not feeling it like the folks in
Yeah.
Silicon Valley. If
Yeah.
you're in
Yeah.
healthcare, that's been, fairly well protected. There's some some folks that I talk to where they've had some impact in their nursing ranks,
Mm-hmm.
but it's generally more safe, if you will. So I think the way I sum it up is my line has been
Yeah.
whether you're growing or slowing, you're being asked to do more with less right now. So if it could be economically driven, it could be based on the numbers in your business, but it could also be the world woke up to this new reality of automation and artificial intelligence, and the
Mm-hmm.
probably outside of some cool tech features when Chat GPT launched, one of the
Yeah.
biggest impacts was every business leader wondering, well, how can we leverage this kind of,
Yeah.
it opened their minds up to, and that's where you might be growing and still looking at becoming more efficient, cutting costs,
Right.
etc.
Well,
So
yeah, as soon as you said do more with less, the immediate thing I said was, or thought in my head, I'm saying now was hello, Chat GTP, or, large language models or whatever. It sure is making all of us more efficient in ways. And that's a whole another thing. I'm sure have many chances to talk about it. I always say I'm not going to talk about it at all on any of these things. And that's ended up being all that we talk about. Because it's like,
yeah,
look, I mean, this is to me, we've been through a lot of hype cycles. There's reality to some of those, right? I mean, Web3, blockchain, VR, whatever, multiverse. Those are all valuable things. They're contributing in good ways, but man, they're to me, they come and go, right? I mean, who's talking about the metaverse really these days? But we're all talking about probably the most significant thing that I've ever come about. And yeah, I talk to a lot of people that have my background in big organizations about how they're used, how's generative AI kind of filtering into what they're doing. And from my world, it's a lot of, well, we know this is awesome, we kind of are in a wait and see mode, we kind of need to understand this and how it can apply and how we can be safe with it. And I found it really interesting. The juxtaposition I have in my mind is, we consumers, as a consumer, we can use Chat GTP or Bard, whatever one you want to use. You can use that anytime we want for pretty much anything we want. But once we get in the walls of a company, we don't have that opportunity. So there's a little bit of a, hey, we know this can help us, but we may not be able to access it all, or we're doing it kind of on the sly, for in a more personalized way. I read an article the other day, and I've read multiple articles about this, about how the job interview process, specifically for developers, in tech companies, has gone from, oh, we'll come polish your toenails and, put cucumbers on your eyes just as a job applicant, to, okay, spend 6 weeks creating this, build an app for us and then give it to us and then, present 15 times. So it's become brutal for these
yeah,
folks. And for me, I I visualize it as ping pong, kind of, almost like sometimes candidates seem to have leverage, or developers. Sometimes the companies have leverage. It seems to go back and forth. But have you actually experienced any of this kind of like brutal developer job interviewing? Is it something that a phenomenon that you're aware of too?
I I I can't I can say that I'm seeing a lot more, as a high level trend, the presentation stuff, I can't stand the work for free things, like
Yeah,
developing
so
something,
wrong.
even on the presentation side of things. They view it as a test. I really don't like it. I'm aware of it as a trend.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it close
yeah,
up on the developer front, but it doesn't
yeah.
surprise me at all. Certain types of employers or individuals think they have leverage. They're going to take advantage of that.
Feels like revenge sometimes to me in some
Yeah.
way. I don't
Yeah.
know. That's probably wrong. I mean, we like to think that employers are very humanistic, and most of the ones I've worked with are, right, and you probably too. So you read these stories about crazy stuff going on. I'm like, I've never really actually seen that firsthand, but it must be real. There's millions of people, so the odds are that some things are going to be wackier than others.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
a big differentiator for you, probably the biggest, is right now is just how you're following the investment side of things, right? And you do tell our listeners a little bit about the work that you do in that area. More specifically, what are you doing? Because you're on top of a lot of data, you process it really well, and you share it in a great way. So talk about that a
Okay.
little.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
It might be interesting to you how I started doing that, how I started
yeah,
getting known for it. So it was a little over 7 years ago, and I've always paid attention to it because it's where's the capital flowing? What's the
yeah.
new technology that's emerging? Where's that that kind of innovation? Where's that happening? And then, but about 7 years ago, things really started to heat up just a little bit in the HR tech space.
Mm-hmm.
So we started to see the traditional sources like CB Insights and Crunchbase start to write about HR tech. There
Mm-hmm.
was actually, it was about 9 years ago, there was a big article, I can remember in the New York Times with a big headline about how much money had just gone into HR tech. And in all of those examples, I would read these things and say, my reaction would be pretty sure I saw a lot more go into HR tech than what they're aware of.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So about 7 to 8 years ago, I started tracking it. The next thing came out from one of those sources, and I was right.
Yeah.
My number was very different than their number, and so at that point, I started tracking it. I started writing about it. Now, what's happened over time is I've got technology that's helping me track it, and um, but the key isn't just having the data. You can go get there are tools that are tracking those announcements,
Mm-hmm.
but the issue is our market is nuanced in
Yeah.
the sort of what our solutions do and compare it's niche in comparison to sales and marketing or fintech or whatever.
Right.
So the data's all out there, but these other properties they don't know how to categorize it. So we're now categorizing into about 60 different subcategories. So there's like, HCM and then a
Yep.
bunch of subcategories, talent
Right.
acquisition, talent management, et cetera. Now that the we've got a big, a long span of data, we can see trends and we can see which investors are active and we can see who's raised what when,
Yeah.
get some pretty interesting perspective on the market.
Yeah.
We every quarter we publish it's a free analysis of what's happened in the space, and of course we roll it up every year and do a annual comparison as well.
Yeah.
um, and as the market's been difficult for the last couple of years, it's been really interesting to be able to compare and contrast the more broad global market for investment and what's happening in our space.
Yeah. That is an interesting because you know so I've done not exactly like that. I've tracked the assessment space much more narrowly, and I did crunch some numbers like right after the pandemic, and I don't know exactly how if I had the same accuracy of sources that you do, but came up with some market estimates and everything. That was very interesting. So I could see how much work that probably is just because of my little world. It was quite a bit, and then keeping up with it can be a lot. But most of that investment data that's publicly available. Like when I go on Crunchbase to look at something or um, any of these other sites, Zoom Info, whatever, you could see right if it's a publicly certified whatever SEC type thing, then who got what investment from whom, right? I mean, that helps you be able to figure that out. So what is the trend right now? What's going on? So I hear a lot of, oh man, it's so hard to raise money now, comparatively to when money was just flowing everywhere. I would say there's always going to be exceptions or whatever, but you hear people speaking in broad generalities, and when I have an expert like you here, let's actually see what the reality is.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation because it is hard. It's also, when you zoom out and really get some perspective, it's not quite as bad as the headlines might suggest.
Yeah.
So I'll give you some numbers. So in 2021 and 2022, or at least the first half of 2022, those were for everyone in every market. Those were the anomalies, right? They were off
Right.
the charts. So 2021 for global HR tech was about 18 billion flowed into the market, right? The
Uh-huh.
biggest year previous
Uh-huh.
was about 5 billion.
Wow. Okay.
So,
3x.
and we had been on some very consistent sort of upward trending years since that 2017 2018 timeframe. So it was sort of growing, and I remember like, wow, we did 2 billion, oh my god, and then we did 4, and then we did
Yeah.
5, and we had that 18, and it was crazy. 2022, the first half was really strong.
Yeah.
Now, at that time, the rest of the world, if you were looking at the headlines in Q2 of 2022, everybody else was already calling it done. And we were still
Right.
on the uptick. But at the end of Q2, we started to trail off. But the whole year ended up being a $13 billion year. So the
Mm-hmm.
first half of the year carried the rest. The
Right.
second half of the year was at like a $7 or $8 billion clip. So it was still, or a run rate, I should say. So that was interesting to me, and I started to call out the differences
Right.
at that time. Now 2023, which we've been looking at now for a while, we were back. It was 5 billion. Now there's a hangover from the 21 and 13
Right.
billion to the
Sure.
5,
Understood. Yeah. Yeah.
and so many startups entered the space and raised, and it wasn't just that they raised at that time, which then they were set up, when the market turned for tough times. It was that the value of the company, the valuation they were given, was so high because
Hmm.
everybody was just growth at all costs, and the
Right.
mindset
Yes.
was, you'll get to a certain point, you'll raise more money, we'll just keep growing this thing.
Yep.
And so then the market turned, and companies weren't willing to reinvest at that high valuation. So companies either have been treading water or going out of business, or extending their previous rounds and having a hard time raising.
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, other really early stage companies have been able to raise money, and but the model's different now, right?
Yes, it is.
So back in, if you raised in 2019 or 2020, you were scaling your resources, you hiring people,
Yep.
etc., way ahead of where your business was. But that was the mindset. Now I see a lot of startups that are 3 or 4 people. It's the founders, a couple of co-founders, and contractors coming in to help. And we're back to basics. We're back
Yeah.
to revenue and a path to profitability. So yes, it's tough out there. It's way
Hmm.
tougher than it was in 2020, 2021, or early 2022. It's hard. That pain is real. A lot of people in startups they had to shut their doors because of
Yep.
they entered the market and the world looked a certain way, and then it looked completely different, and they had burned all their cash.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really tough, but it's not. I think we're normalizing. And I spoke to the head of the ADP Ventures Fund, and he had a great term for it. I'll give him
Hmm.
credit for it. Oz Khan. He said, um, he can't wait for, right now we're heading back to where people are deploying capital again. They're
Yeah.
starting to invest, and we've got this more realistic view of how these companies need to operate, and some of the growth mindsets coming. He can't wait for these things to all harmonize, right? I
Yep.
thought that was a great way to
Harmonized. Yeah.
sort of level out in the market.
Hmm. Yeah. Look at it in a macro sense. It seems like maybe it was a little bit of an aberration, those 3 years, and the pandemic was in there. Who knows how that influenced things as well. But it is true that the try to I wouldn't say empty calories, maybe is the wrong way to say it, but just the idea that growth over EBITDA, whatever, you're just going, and that somebody's got to pay at some point for most companies. So, well, what are the so in today's world right now, what are you seeing? I mean, this is probably like a softball here. I think I know the answer, but where are you seeing the most action, the most interest? Who is really seeming to be the well, I guess who that's a not naming names, but just segment wise, what is the momentum people who are doing X seem to be getting a lot of attention, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So thinking about the products and how the categories and how they align to HR. So on the core HR side, there's still a lot of interest and around any pay related technology. So it could
Right?
be global pay, it could be pay equity, it could be data that is supporting all of these things. I'll just name one or two categories in
Sure.
each. On the talent management side, so thinking about everything sort of post hire from a talent perspective, there is there's a huge appetite for internal mobility and
Oh
skills,
yeah.
and and not just all skills with a capital S, all
Hmm.
types of
Yep.
skills, how to identify skills, how to see where they are in an organization, and how to balance resources across the
Yep.
organization. Big lot of interest there, and those applications can all that are addressing that can all look different, from a marketplace to a data play.
Totally.
On the talent acquisition side, the what used to be hot were like sort of anything that was a source, right? Anything that
Yep.
could give me a source of new data.
Right.
That's slowed down a little bit, because we don't need, it's not as hard to fill the top of the funnel right now in the
Yeah.
employment market. But
True.
anything that is high volume, frontline, so it could be and it's I don't like we used to say like blue collar.
Right.
That's not how I think about it. It's anybody that's dealing with customers. It
Yep.
could be in the financial market. It could be someone in a call center dealing with service, or
Yep.
it could be in a retail environment or a restaurant or a hospital or whatever. In those areas, there is a real appreciation for the direct line from talent to
Hmm.
revenue, and
Yep.
talent to productivity. So in a manufacturing environment, if I have to shut down a production line, that's top line revenue. I don't get to ship product, right, if I don't
Yeah.
have the people there. So they're any tools that are helping in that environment are attracting a lot of attention. And I would say I didn't say AI, but you could
Yeah.
imply AI across.
Pretty
Like, you've
much.
got to
Yeah.
have an AI story
Pretty much.
across all of those. But the real thing, you've got to start with the problem that you're solving, and then how do we leverage automation, AI,
Amen.
data to do it?
Amen. AI is not a solution in itself. I've counseled a lot of times on that. Well, the internal talent mobility, as somebody referred to it the other day as ITM. That was the first time I'd heard that little thing. But yeah, and that's all skills, right? And that, to me, if you'd asked me the same question, although I don't have as broad a view because I'm more on the talent acquisition side of things, skills are it. I wish people I wish it wasn't such a giant word that lacked more specificity. I think people throw it around with it could mean a lot of different things. To me, it means things that people have that can create value for a company, right? And so it could be a lot of different things. We know we could look at those a lot. So, do you have a head scratcher? Something you've seen in the last little while? Maybe this last year, 2023, something where you're like, what? Why did that happen? This doesn't make sense in terms of any kind of investment stuff or deal stuff, anything like that.
I would say, there's so many head scratchers.
Yeah, I know, right?
So,
What's not? Do
so
you have a non-head scratcher? Can we turn? We'll flip it around.
well, I'll tell you one really good one. First off, in our market, there's still surprisingly so much gender inequity with
Uh huh.
founders. So
Right.
it's when I look again, it's another area where when I look broadly, where our market, I meet with a lot of women that are founders.
Yeah.
So it's better than other areas, but it doesn't really reflect the our world that we're in
Right.
this HR
Right.
world. So
Right.
that's all. I'm always scratching my head on that, and then that's a big conversation
Right.
that goes beyond our space. Another area that I have been really disappointed about
Yeah.
has been diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Hmm.
I do an quarterly webinars on investment, and I've so many times I've said, look at this small amount that it showed up on the top 15,
Right.
but I'm really hopeful that we'll see more investment there. And I think,
Right.
part of the challenge is it's a systemic problem, and you've got to solve it across all your systems. It's not,
Exactly.
it's hard to have a point solution on that. But in the world of work tech, it's an embedded,
Exactly.
you
You
know,
bake it into your product. It's part of what you're trying to accomplish with the end goal of whatever you're doing. You want to infuse it with that, right?
right.
Yeah.
But I'm still, I've been disappointed that I haven't seen more explicit, messaging or positioning around that. And then in this environment, it's actually, I've had the founders that I do know in that space have had to start messaging differently about their products because it's become so politicized that it's they've got to sort of stay away from the hot
Yeah. Yeah.
buttons out there.
Mm,
So anyhow, the triggers, I guess.
yeah.
So if you look at the world of global payroll, so outside of in the U.S. we have professional employment organizations, PEOs.
Right.
If you're paying globally, it's an employer of record. So
Right.
it's a similar kind of model where these companies are sort of co-employing, but they're establishing the ability to pay within a geographic region globally
Right.
versus around the U.S.
Sure.
And we've had some like Deal that have done really, really well,
Mm-hmm.
and then some that like and Papaya Global has done really,
Right.
really well. Then
Uh-huh.
you got companies like Atlas is one that I know a lot of folks are concerned about right now. And so I look at I when I look at that and I see like this one or two companies that are off to the side not performing as well as others
Right.
in a space that's been really hot.
Right.
I don't know if it's an execution thing. I don't know if they got ahead of they raised too much too fast and
Right.
missed the timing on the market. But it's there's some I've been very curious about that. But yeah, so I don't know. There's a few for you.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks. So something that I feel like you're a good person to answer a question that I've asked myself a lot. I've never really asked anybody else that I can remember, but if you think about innovation, the market, and what people are buying, is it that you know vendors, companies build amazing tools that people want to adopt, and that's how things kind of move forward, evolve, or is it that people are looking for tools, and there's folks out there commercially who say, oh well, there's got to be a big market for this, we hear people are looking for this. Is that even a good way to look at it? In other words, what's the engine driving it? Is people putting product out, oh these products are great, we're going to buy them, and the company grows, or is it the other way around, like, oh we need this?
I think everything really starts with the customer.
Yeah.
So the answer is truly that there's a need. It may not be that the customer, the HR leader, the head of talent acquisition has clearly defined the product that's going to fit and solve their
Right.
problem, but there's a need there, and that's
Mm.
where it all starts.
Yeah.
Let me flip it another way. One of the biggest mistakes founders make is they develop a product in a lab, in their basement, in their
Yep.
garage, and wherever, without ever talking to customers.
Yeah.
And they don't really understand the problem that they're solving. They've got an amazing interface, amazing technology,
Right.
incredible engineers, whiz bang stuff going on,
Right.
and nobody needs it.
Yeah.
It all has to be driven by a need and a demand. Now, the exceptions, although I would argue they still come back to the customer needs. So you could say, what about all this AI stuff? Well, we're still figuring out where that's going to have the most
Exactly.
impact. In some areas, there's low hanging fruit, but they're features. It's like, oh, it
Yeah.
can help you write a great message to an employee or a candidate. Right. And
Mhm.
pretty soon, every app you open up is going to have that.
It already is getting close, right? You know,
Yeah,
so
yeah. But where can we leverage this technology to really address or the skills issue, or to support freelancers, or whatever the issue is? That's still taking shape,
yeah,
and it will be driven by the customers, because the whole thing exists to, these are businesses, and with the
yeah.
tech company is there to make money, and you're there to, on the HR side, they're helping run a business that hopefully makes money
Yeah.
and keeps people employed.
Yeah, it needs to be symbiotic. You know, I think in my mind, as you're talking, I said, oh yeah, the answer is probably pretty obvious, Charles. You should have thought of that. But it's like if you think about it in my world, and probably that's because I've had the most experience. Some of the best stuff comes from, oh, you're in there, you're working with a client, you see what a need you may say, oh, I can go build this for you, or I have this skill set. Let's create this together. Or even as you get in there, how many times, I'm sure you've seen it more than me, you come up with one idea and you start working with a customer who's like, well, if it could really only do this, that would be great. And you're like, oh, well, we're early on here, we're trying to find our way, you need this, okay, well, let's apply ourselves to this. And then all of a sudden you've solved this, and you think, well, if they had this problem, I bet a lot of other people have it too, right? So it's probably not a black or white thing. And I think collaboration is so great, right? And if you're in business and you're trying to start something and you have somebody that you can help, right? I mean, ultimately, to me at least, it should be about helping someone achieve something, get rid of pain, solve a problem, grow. And if you can be a partner in doing that with your product, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, totally. And that's, that collaborative relationship between the folks that are developing the technology and the folks that are consuming it, using it, applying it. I think that really reflects, 7 years ago when I was started tracking all this and talking about it, it's almost in our space, for some reason, it's looked at like, oh, that belongs over here on the side. But
Yeah.
in every other space, when you look at big tech, you look at sales and marketing tech, fintech, it's it's one conversation. And I think that's why, because you need to be following the innovation, engaging with the innovators, and they're not just at startups, they're at
Yeah,
some big companies as well,
for sure.
and engaging in that conversation to shape the future, and also open your mind up to what the possibilities are. I think that's so. I like that collaborative angle that you
Yeah.
take on it.
I mean, I think in life in general, that's a really good approach. So you have a good segue as we kind of wind our way out of here today. It's a really great conversation. The commercial side of this stuff is just like, I'm so obsessed with it lately. I don't know what it may be, the last maybe 5 to 10 years, and I love when I get a chance to work with startups. It's so much fun. The energy is great, and it's a unique thing. But okay, we're 2024, just in a couple months into it. So let's round it out. 2030, right? Get out your crystal ball. You've seen a lot. I would qualify it with, nobody saw the Gen AI stuff coming or anything. So, if I used to love to look at the popular science when I was a kid, where it'd be like, here's what was on our cover 100 years ago. There
Right.
was a
Oh
lot
my
of
God.
misses,
Yeah.
some hits too, but yeah. So what do you think? What's going to be happening if we're sitting here 6 years from now talking about the world of HR technology and how people are working in organizations with it?
Well, I think this is going to sound like I'm contradicting myself. We're going to have a lot more technology, but we're going to have fewer interfaces. So,
Definitely
uh,
multimodal. Yeah, we're gonna have agents, man. Agents are gonna do everything for us.
yeah, yeah.
My
So I
agent will
think,
be interviewing your agent on a podcast. That's
yeah,
what's gonna
there you
happen.
go. There you go. The so the one of the core, when we defined work tech, there are six core principles, and one of them, the way I sum it up, is it's design without ego. So it's not
Right.
design. You may have an interface for those who need it, or you might just be a product that it's a pure data play. It's you're integrating data and then feeding back to the systems that where it's needed.
Hmm.
But if you think about your desktop or your phone or your mobile, How many systems do you need to log into right now in order to get
Yep.
something done? And then thinking about, can can the systems be working for me and moving things along? So I
Yeah.
think I think you're right. I think that, or that the multimodal, the sort of agents, the invisible agents, sort
Yep.
of, an action triggers an action and a workflow that I don't need to be clicking on things. I just need the end result
Yeah.
at the point in time and in this in the system where I need it. So
Yeah.
I think we're headed, that's where we're headed now. Will we be working with like humanoid robots? And I don't know.
Well,
I have no idea, but
yeah.
it's crazy how fast one of the big changes right now is how fast things are changing. So that you talked about the trends, when it's always been the case where, think about any trend that took over the market, it takes 5 to 10 years before we really know how it's going to
Right.
sit. This is happening so much faster now, and
Oh my God.
it's the cost of the barrier of entry is almost non-existent as far as creating something. Then the technology itself is learning and adapting. It just blows my mind to, like, when you listen to these folks from OpenAI or whatever, and
Yeah.
it's like, well, we don't really know why the system does that,
Oh yeah.
but it's smart. It's like, that is
Smart in
not
a
where I
lot of
came from.
ways. Yeah. I mean, it's yeah. It's like the existential, philosophical stuff that underlies everything about being human in this world now is just it's bonkers. It does feel a lot like sci-fi. I use ChatGTP all the time, and
Yeah, me too.
no, I never cease to marvel at every time I do it. I'm like, okay, what do I do to balance these pool chemicals? Boom, there it goes. The thing tells me exactly what to do, but it can do so many other things, and you can like get really complicated with it, as well. And I just, it's, I can't see how it's not going to just blow the blow the whole thing up. I don't know which way. I mean, I get flummoxed just even thinking about it, but it's going to find its way into this stuff. It already is, and I don't think it's going to be just because of the gee whiz bang gimmicky part of it. I have my own thoughts about the hiring world, but I think it's it's gonna help people do better at their jobs and help companies be more productive. We know that. Hopefully, it makes the work experience better for people. Just work employers and employees. It's got to be a symbiotic thing. For me, being a psychologist, I think about it that way. It's like, and we hope that these technologies can still help companies create value for their employees and vice versa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad used to, he's long retired, but he was a electrician, journeyman electrician.
Uh huh.
And there was a concept that I watched him live. You go where the work is.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
He worked in New York City, went in building the Twin Towers. He worked in Montreal. He worked out west. You went
Right.
where the work was. That's what we
Mm-hmm.
grew up as a young child in New Jersey, and then later on in New England, because that's where the
Right.
work was,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
highest
Sure.
percentage of it. So I think we need to start adopting some of that and looking at, what is our work? How is this technology impacting things? If I'm if I'm doing work that doesn't require a lot of creativity or thought, or sort of, I don't want to say strategic, but a lot of analysis, and it's not relationship driven or any of these things, that then it can probably be automated. If it's
Yeah.
transactional, it can
Yeah.
probably be automated. And I probably need to start thinking about, how can I leverage the skills that I do have to be in an environment where maybe, it's the human interaction that's important, or maybe it's the leveraging the tools to then, provide the experience as an HR leader. Uh, or that's where you're going to get caught with bad timing, when things start to, how many interview schedulers are employed today versus,
Yeah.
15 years ago. You
Yeah.
think about the ranks of those folks in
Mm,
large TA environments,
right.
and that happened slowly, and those folks were able to move into other roles.
Right. Right.
This is happening much faster, so I
It
think we
is.
need to
It
be
is.
aware.
I know. I know. We all like. Yeah. It's the a closing note here. I I talk about it a lot in my writings. We talk about it here. Human skills, uniquely human skills, are going to become more and more important. And then I start thinking, well, at what point weren't human skills important in a job? I mean, if you don't have them, you don't have them. So I don't know how that all goes. So tell everybody as we about where they can find you, where they can get in touch with your research and you. I know everybody says LinkedIn, but I think you have a little bit more going on than that, right? So, Work Tech, tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about that and where people can find you there.
Yeah, the website is oneworktech.com. However you get the number one or spell it out, you'll get to the same place. I'm also pretty active at events. I'll be at Transform this year, and I'll be out at HR Tech. I also chair at HR Tech. They started a investor forum. It's a pre-conference to HR Tech. I chair that. I'm out and about quite a bit, and you can find me on LinkedIn, but
Yeah.
all the usual places. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you so much for sharing some time with me today, and I really appreciate your insights. Are always great.
Well, thank you, Charles. This was fun, and anytime.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I want to encourage all the listeners out there to share this podcast with their friends, families, colleagues. People don't find podcasts just randomly typically. They do so at the recommendations of others that they trust and, people who've really enjoyed that content and want to share. And I certainly sincerely hope you've enjoyed the content of this episode and the others like it, and encourage you to please share with your friends, family, and coworkers. Let them know about this podcast and what we have to offer. They're going to definitely walk away smarter, sharper, and thinking about some really interesting issues, which is what we all want, right? Thank you very much. Until next time.